So this is the Radeon RX 460. This is a graphics card that was launched in August of 2016. So this is borderline 6 years old now in 2022, actually 5 years and 4 months. And this was my first graphics card. And in this video, I want to try gaming on the RX 460 in 2022 to conclude if it's a 1080p 60 FPS card or a 1080p 30 FPS card, or if it can game at all. So in this video, let's test out and try to game on the RX 460 in 2022. Alright, so let's talk about the card first. This is the MSI RX 460 with the 2GB frame buffer. I highly recommend, if you can find this graphic card, in 2022, to get the 4GB variant, because that really helps. And most of the games do require 4GB of RAM. And some of the games actually will give you warnings when you try to up the quality or resolution that you do not have enough VRAM. Talking about the other specs, it's pretty small and compact. This does not require any extra power. It can just run off the PCIe slots, 70 watts of power. It runs really cool, has a decent sized fan, a decent heatsink, HDMI port, display port, and a DVI. Really small, compact, and cute graphics card. And as I said earlier, this was my first graphics card, so the love I have for this thing is more than RTX 3090. And to test this graphics card out, we're using the Core i3-9100F CPU. That's a 4-core CPU, so again, really enough to use something like this on MSI Z390A motherboard with 16GB of RAM at 3200 MHz, a normal SSD, a 750 watt power supply, and a liquid cooler from Gamdias, the Kioni M240 Lite. And that's pretty much it. Those are the specifications. And talking about the clock speed, this graphics card can boost up to 1210 MHz. And for our testing, we're going to start off with a bunch of esports titles. Then we're going to move on to some popular titles which are not that demanding but are played by a lot of people. And then we will hit the RX 460 with the ultimate test of AAA gaming in 2022, putting the most demanding games at it to see how it performs. With that being said, here are the benchmarks. Now, trying a really popular esports title like Counter-Strike Global Offensive at 1080p with everything turned up to the max setting and even some of the anti-aliasing and effect details against real players in a deathmatch, I think this is really good performance. We are getting upwards of 120 FPS, and CSGO is a CPU intensive game, and usually people don't play CSGO at 1080p. They, have some sort of a custom resolution that they think they perform better at, usually 4:3 stretched. So yeah, if you're into CSGO, even if you have a high refresh rate monitor, I think using RX 460 you should be able to get a really good experience. And yes, MSI Afterburner does not work in CSGO because Valve thinks it's a cheat program. Next on our list is another popular esports title these days, which is Valorant. And at 1080p with the graphics quality maxed out, I think this should be pretty playable as well, because Valorant is a more CPU bound game than GPU bound. But again, at higher resolutions and higher quality, the game can use extra GPU power. So yeah, here we are getting upwards of 110 FPS. So you can see the average FPS as well as the current FPS, really similar. And even during action packed scenes where you're playing a 5v5 comp, you enter a site and you're facing maybe 3 or 4 people, I think the FPS number should be good. And yeah, esports gaming, as I said in the start of the video, is really enjoyable on the RX 460. Now, in an esports title like Rocket League, going to the settings, you see that I've set everything to high quality, enabled every quality feature there is in this game, and the resolution is 1080p. Now, if you want really good performance out of this game, you could set it to quality, performance, or if you're really behind that FPS number, high performance is the way to go. But here we're testing the limits of the RX 460. So here you go, 1080p maxed out settings for Rocket League. And I think the game is really enjoyable here. 80 to 85 FPS, sometimes in the lower 70s, is still playable. The game looks good, and personally, having played over 500 hours of Rocket League, this game above 60 FPS is actually really good. And you can't really tell the difference between 60 and maybe 144 if you are not really an enthusiast gamer. So, esports gaming definitely seems to be the strong point for the RX 460. Now coming to a game like GTA 5 with the resolution set to 1080p and some of the anti-aliasing turned off and everything else set to high, the experience is actually really good. The average FPS is somewhere around 65 to 70, and even in an area where there's lots of vehicles and lots of action happening, I think this is very playable. At 1080p high settings, the game looks good and also very playable. Now with some action here, lots of people shooting at me, it's still holding up really well. So in my opinion, GTA 5 is really playable on a card like the RX 460. Now coming to a game like Control, which is really optimized for NVIDIA cards at full screen 1080p, although there is a downscaling option, we're still going to opt for 1080p and just try out the lowest setting possible. Now this game does support ray tracing, but of course AMD cards don't have ray tracing. So yeah, here's how the game performs. And I am screen recording at the moment, so your performance will always be better than mine. It is definitely playable in my opinion, like upwards of 40 FPS. And I think in an action-packed scene you might dip to maybe 35, but I think this is still playable at 1080p as it's upwards of 30 FPS. So yeah, Control, if you enjoy this kind of story-based games, can actually be run on the RX 460. Now playing one of my favorite games from last year, Battlefield 5. Again, here the resolution is at 1080p and the settings is at the lowest with the resolution scale set to 100%. Definitely brought back some memories, a lot of nostalgia in this game. And the FPS number is actually really playable. Battlefield 5 in my opinion seems to be one of the only games that was launched last year, is a AAA title and runs pretty smoothly in my opinion. Like the FPS number is really playable, very close to 60 at 1080p. And I think I personally wouldn't mind playing at this setting. So even with an action-packed scene where a bunch of bullets being fired, a lot of people in your screen, yes, there might be a little bit of stuttering and dips, but I think this is pretty playable on the RX 460. Alright, so now playing the most hyped game of last year and also the one with the most bugs and weird performance numbers, Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p lowest settings on the RX 460. And even though the game looks half decent, I don't think this is actually playable. Alright, so now playing a more demanding game like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, new title. Here we have the resolution set to 1080p, everything down to the bare minimums. This does not even have a low option here. And I'm also turning on adaptive quality for a target of 60 FPS because I know this game is really heavy, and just running the in-game benchmark to see how the performance will be. The in-game benchmark has started, and this will give us a really good idea of all the different areas and environments and textures in the game. And here you can see the RX 460 seems to be struggling a lot. Even maintaining a 30 FPS average at 1080p low is, a struggle. If you put down the resolution to 720p, maybe you could get that 35 to 40 FPS, but again, we're trying to conclude if the RX 460 can handle AAA games in 2022 at 1080p, which isn't the case in AC Valhalla. Alright, so while I was trying to play RDR2 and when I set the resolution to 1080p, for the first time I got the warning that the resolution I'm trying to play at is not compatible with my graphic card because this is the 2 gig variant and there is a limitation. So for games like RDR2, I highly recommend you get the 4 gig variant of this graphic card, or try to get a different one because minimum of 4 gigabytes is required. But just playing at 1600 into 900 at the lowest possible settings using DX12, this is the kind of performance you expect. Now it is playable at 1600 into 900. This is 30 plus FPS, and some people do enjoy at 30 FPS. Some games, like in some of the consoles as well, you have 30 FPS gaming. So if this is your thing, this is how it looks, and yeah, it is playable. But I wouldn't really say that the RX 460 can do RDR2 at 1080p. Alright, so you saw how this handles games, and it is a 1080p esports card in my opinion if you do want to buy something like this in 2022. Now, if you want to play AAA games or some of the more popular titles, I think you can do better with a 1050 Ti or something from Nvidia, or the RX 470 or 570. The 460 is not a bad card. It is a workhorse of a GPU in my opinion for a home theater system, for watching movies, basic games like 1080p esports titles, as we saw CSGO, Valorant, Rocket League. They perform really well, even GTA 5, Battlefield 5. But if you want that 1080p 60 FPS locked in gameplay, this probably isn't the card to get in 2022. But in case if you can find the 4GB variant of this card, the performance will be better in the modern AAA titles because there is more VRAM for the games to use. But other than that, if you do find this card, you can buy it. But a better suggestion would be to stick to AMD's APUs, the Ryzen 5 5600G and the 5700G. Those have similar graphics performance, and getting those means that you can add a better GPU in the future when prices calm down. But for 2016 standards, for $100, this was a good GPU. But even when it was launched in 2016, this wasn't supposed to max out games at 1080p. It was just supposed to be there as a competition to the GTX 1050, and the 1050 was better. But I really wanted to try gaming on a 5-year-old GPU in 2022, so I pulled out my old RX 460. This brought back lots of memories, lots of nostalgia while playing games that I used to play on this card, and just a fun video to make. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed, if you found this entertaining. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. Let me know in the comments down below what other card you want me to test out from the past. Maybe a GT 1030, maybe the new Quadro 3600, but the RX 460 shall always be my best friend. My name has been Yusuf. You guys have been awesome. Stay awesome, keep smiling, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.